The letter arrived on a Tuesday in October. It was thin, one page. The envelope had the bank's logo in the upper left corner and a window through which Harold Bauer's name and address were printed in machine-perfect type. Harold opened it standing at the mailbox. He read it once. Then he folded it in half, slid it into his shirt pocket, and walked the quarter-mile back up the gravel drive to the house. The letter said the property at 4847 County Road North in Pickens Township, Tennessee, was subject to a lien recovery action filed by Cumberland Trust Bank. The letter said the lien dated to 1979 had been preserved through portfolio acquisition and now required immediate satisfaction in the amount of $186,400. The letter gave Harold 30 days. After that, the bank would file for forced sale of the property. Harold was 69 years old. He had lived on that land for 54 years. His father had lived there for 31 years before him. There had never been a lien on the property in Harold's lifetime. He sat down at the kitchen table. He took the letter out of his shirt pocket, unfolded it, and read it a second time. Then he set it down and looked out the window at the field his father had cleared by hand in 1944. He did not call anyone that day. He did not call anyone the next day either. On Thursday morning, he walked out to the barn, climbed the wooden ladder to the loft, and brought down a rusty tin box that had sat on a shelf above his father's old workbench since 1971. Harold Bauer was 69 years old, and the land at 4847 County Road North had been in his family since 1944. His father, Conrad Bauer, had bought the original 80 acres after returning from the war, working 2 jobs in the mill town of Athens, Tennessee, while clearing the back 40 by hand on weekends. Conrad had built the original house, a small 4-room farmhouse, in 1947. He had married Elsie Whitcomb the same year. Harold had been born in the front bedroom of that house in 1956. Conrad Bauer had been a quiet man. He had served in Italy in the war and had not spoken about it. He had been a millwright by trade and a farmer by necessity. He had kept his own books, paid his own taxes, and trusted no institution he had not first watched operate for at least 10 years. Conrad had also kept records. Everything. Every receipt, every contract, every signed document, every handwritten letter. He had stored them in a series of metal tins in a wooden crate in the barn loft. The tins were labeled in his handwriting in black grease pencil, by year, by category, property, equipment, taxes, loans. Conrad had died of a stroke in 1990. He was 68 years old. Harold had been 33. On the afternoon of his father's funeral, Harold had climbed up to the barn loft for the first time in years and stood looking at the wooden crate. He had not opened any of the tins. He had told himself he would, eventually. He had not. His mother Elsie had stayed on the farm until 2003. She died at 79. Harold and his wife Diane had moved into the main house the following spring. Diane had been a school teacher in Pickens County for 38 years. She had taught 4th grade. She had died of a heart attack in her kitchen in 2018 at the age of 63. Harold had found her. After Diane died, Harold had stopped going up into the barn loft entirely. He told himself it was because of his knees. It was not because of his knees. Harold had 2 children, a son, James, who lived in Knoxville and worked for an insurance company, a daughter, Carol, who lived in Memphis and taught music. Both of them called every Sunday. Neither of them had been back to the farm in 2 years. When Harold sat at the kitchen table on that Tuesday afternoon in October and read the letter from Cumberland Trust Bank for the second time, he did not call James or Carol. He set the letter down and looked out the window at the front field. The corn was finished for the year. The stalks were brown. A red-tailed hawk was sitting on the fence post at the far end. Harold had paid every property tax bill on that land for the past 35 years. He had never borrowed a dollar against it. He had never signed a document with Cumberland Trust Bank. Cumberland Trust Bank, in fact, did not exist in 1979. The bank that existed in Pickens County in 1979 was called First Mountain Federal. They had been bought by a regional holding company in 1994. That holding company had been bought by Cumberland Trust in 2011. Harold did not know any of that yet, but he was about to find out. Cumberland Trust Bank was a regional institution headquartered in Nashville with branches in 4 states. Its corporate counsel for portfolio recovery matters was a 41-year-old attorney named Garrett Pinnell. Pinnell was a Vanderbilt Law School graduate. He had joined Cumberland Trust in 2019 after 7 years at a debt acquisition firm in Atlanta. He specialized in what the bank's annual report called legacy asset reactivation, recovering value from old loan portfolios acquired through bank mergers in the 1990s and early 2000s. Pinnell had a system. He worked through old portfolio files alphabetically by county. He flagged any loan that had not been formally satisfied through documented payoff. He sent demand letters. He waited. Approximately 1 in 4 cases produced a settlement. The bank had recovered $14.2 million through this program in the previous fiscal year. Pinnell's bonus was tied to that number. Pinnell had spent, by his own time logs, 2 hours and 11 minutes on Harold Bauer's file before sending the October letter. The lien Pinnell had identified was real, in the sense that it appeared in the original First Mountain Federal records that Cumberland Trust had inherited. It was a 1979 agricultural equipment loan in the amount of $14,800, taken out by Conrad Bauer to purchase a used International Harvester combine. The loan was secured by a lien on the property. The lien had never been formally released in the bank's records. What Pinnell had not done in his 2 hours and 11 minutes was cross-reference the original loan agreement against the file's later correspondence. If he had, he would have seen something else. He did not. He sent the letter. Harold did not climb the ladder to the barn loft on Thursday morning easily. His knees were bad. He had been a millwright like his father, and 41 years on concrete floors had given him the kind of joints that no longer bent without warning him first. He climbed it anyway. 1 rung at a time, 1 hand on the rail, the other on the rung above. It took him 4 minutes to climb a ladder that had taken his father 10 seconds. The barn loft was exactly as Conrad had left it in 1990. The wooden crate was still in the southwest corner. The label on the side, in Conrad's grease pencil, still read, "Papers, everything." Harold knelt down, slowly, carefully, and opened the crate. There were 11 tin boxes inside. Each was labeled in Conrad's handwriting. Property 1944 to 1959, property 1960 to 1979, property 1980 to 1990, equipment 1955 to 1979, equipment 1980 to 1990, taxes 1944 to 1990, loans 1944 to 1990. The loans box was the second from the bottom. Harold lifted it out. It was heavier than the others. The lid was rusted. He worked it open with a flat screwdriver from his pocket. Inside was a stack of folders, each labeled by year, each one tied with kitchen twine. The folder marked 1979 was on top of the loan stack. Harold sat on the loft floor, slowly, his knees protesting, and untied the twine. The folder contained the original loan agreement from First Mountain Federal, dated April 11, 1979. It contained the amortization schedule. It contained 63 monthly payment receipts, each one stamped and initialed by the bank's teller. It contained the final payment receipt, dated July 18, 1984. And it contained one more document, a single sheet of yellow paper folded in half on First Mountain Federal letterhead. The document was dated August 2, 1984. It was a formal release of lien, signed by the bank's loan officer, a man named Walter Henneman, and notarized by a county clerk named Edith Pratt. The document released, in full and forever, the agricultural equipment lien against the property at 4847 County Road North. Harold looked at the document for a long time. Then he refolded it carefully and put it back in the folder. He retied the twine. He put the folder back in the tin. He closed the lid. He carried the tin down the ladder. It took him 9 minutes to descend. Harold's lawyer was a woman named Rebecca Tilden. She practiced in a one-room office above a feed store in Pickens. She was 58 years old. She had been Diane Bauer's first cousin's daughter. She had drawn up Diane's will in 2018. Harold called her on Friday morning. He drove to her office that afternoon with the tin box on the passenger seat of his truck. Rebecca read the bank's letter first. She did not look surprised. She had seen 3 other letters like it in the past 18 months, all from Cumberland Trust, all targeting older landowners in Pickens and the surrounding counties. "Harold," she said, "I'm not going to lie to you. These cases are hard. The bank has the original lien on file. The burden is on us to prove satisfaction." Harold opened the tin box. He took out the 1979 folder. He untied the twine. He laid the documents out on Rebecca's desk in chronological order. Rebecca read the loan agreement. She read the amortization schedule. She read the payment receipts. She read the final payment stub. Then she picked up the yellow release of lien. She read it once, then again. Then she set it down and looked at Harold. "Harold," she said, "this changes everything. But I have to tell you, and I'm being honest with you, banks fight these. They'll claim the document is fraudulent. They'll claim it was never recorded. They'll demand we produce the original. They'll drag it out for a year." Harold nodded. "What do we do?" Rebecca thought for a moment. Then she said, "We file, and we make them defend their own paper trail." Cumberland Trust Bank's response to Rebecca's filing arrived on a Monday in late November. It was 19 pages long, drafted by Garrett Pinnell himself. It argued that the August 2, 1984 release of lien was of unverified provenance, that no such release appeared in the bank's portfolio records, that the document might have been generated outside official bank procedures, and that the original lien remained legally enforceable. Pinnell requested a hearing in federal court in the Eastern District of Tennessee. He intended to appear personally. He had been told by his managing partner that this case, if won, would set a precedent that would discourage other landowners from contesting reactivation claims in the region. The hearing was scheduled for January 14th. The courtroom was on the 3rd floor of the Federal Building in Knoxville. It was a small room, wood-paneled, an American flag in the corner, cold air from a vent above the bench. The judge was a woman named Patricia Marlin. She had been on the federal bench for 23 years. She had read the filings the night before. Garrett Pinnell arrived first, pressed gray suit, 2 associates beside him, both young, both carrying matching leather folders. He was confident. He had argued 47 similar cases. He had won 39 of them. Harold arrived with Rebecca Tilden. He wore a clean white shirt, a navy tie that Diane had picked out for him in 2015, and the dark slacks he wore to funerals. He carried a manila folder. Pinnell spoke first. He spoke for 19 minutes. He cited 8 cases. He explained, in dense legal language, the doctrine of lien continuity in portfolio acquisitions. He referred to the release document as an artifact of unclear origin and suggested the court should give it no evidentiary weight. When he finished, he sat down. Rebecca stood up. She spoke for less than 2 minutes. "Your Honor," she said, "the document in question was prepared by First Mountain Federal Bank, signed by their loan officer Walter Henneman, and notarized by Edith Pratt of Pickens County on August 2, 1984. We have the original. We will provide it for the court's inspection. We will further point out that on page 31 of the bank's own filing, the original 1979 loan agreement notes, in the bank's standard 1979 form language, that final satisfaction shall be evidenced by a written release issued at the time of final payment. We are providing that release. The bank's own contract requires it." She placed the yellow document on the bench. Judge Marlin picked it up. She read it once. Then she opened the bank's own filing to page 31 and read that. The room was silent. Judge Marlin looked at Garrett Pinnell. "Counselor," she said, "did your office cross-reference this release of lien against your client's own original loan documentation before filing this action?" Pinnell stood. "Your Honor, our records did not reflect—" "That is not what I asked. Did your office search the original 1979 file for a corresponding release before filing the recovery action?" Pinnell did not answer for a moment. "Your Honor, our portfolio review process—" "Yes or no, Counselor?" Pinnell looked at the table. "No, Your Honor." Judge Marlin set the yellow document down. She looked at Harold briefly. Then she looked back at Pinnell. "This action is dismissed with prejudice. The lien is declared satisfied as of August 2nd, 1984. The court further finds that Cumberland Trust Bank shall pay damages to Mr. Bauer in the amount of $340,000 for the costs and distress of defending against an action that the bank's own records, properly searched, would have shown to be without merit. She set down her pen. "We are adjourned." Harold did not say anything in the courtroom. He stood up when Rebecca stood up. He walked out beside her. In the hallway, she squeezed his arm and told him he had done well. He nodded. He drove home that afternoon. The drive was 4 hours. He did not turn on the radio. He stopped once for gas in Athens, near the mill where his father had worked. He looked at the mill from the gas station for a few minutes, then got back in the truck. He arrived at the farm at 5:30 in the evening. The light was sideways and orange. The air smelled like cut wood and frost. He parked the truck by the barn. He took the tin box off the passenger seat and carried it inside. He set it on the kitchen table. Then he walked back outside, across the yard, past the old smokehouse, down the slope toward the family cemetery his grandfather had laid out in 1948 at the edge of the back field. There were 6 stones: his grandparents, his father, his mother, Diane, in the corner under the dogwood tree, and one empty space next to her, which Harold had bought in 2018. He stood at his father's stone. The stone read, Conrad W. Bauer, 1922 to 1990. Below the name, his father had asked for one line, and Elsie had honored it. Kept what he built. Harold stood there for a long time. The light got lower. The hawk that had been on the fence post all fall flew across the field and disappeared into the tree line. Harold did not say anything for a while. Then he said quietly, "You kept everything, Dad." He stood there another minute. Then he turned and walked back to the house. Land like Harold's doesn't survive by accident. It survives because someone 50 years ago put a piece of yellow paper in a tin box and labeled it in grease pencil. It survives because someone else, 50 years later, climbed a ladder he should not have been climbing to find it. If you've made it this far, you already understand that. You're exactly the kind of person this channel is for. The next story is about a widow named Ellen Marsh in Greene County, Iowa, and a developer who told her, in front of her neighbors, that her late husband's handshake deal wasn't worth the paper it wasn't written on. What Ellen found in her husband's tackle box changed the entire road system of 3 counties. Subscribe so you don't miss it. We'll see you there. Paste your script.